stay quiet and do as I say.
The corruption in this precinct needs to stop, and I'm not afraid to expose it.
You can't just search my car without probable cause. This is exactly what I'm talking about.
Remain calm and comply with our instructions. I'm recording this right now. They have no reason to hold me here, but you need to see what's happening. As you can see, they're approaching the vehicle now. I want everyone to witness this interaction. My hands are visible.
The hot asphalt vibrated under Marcus's feet as the sound of sirens sliced through the thick evening air. His chest tightened. It wasn't the first time. Another random stop. Another petty offense. Another reminder that he was always out of place in a city that was never meant for him. But this time felt different. Marcus glanced at his phone, still recording. The police officer's eyes locked on him, narrowing with suspicion as he leaned out of the squad car. The officer's fingers curled around the handle of his baton like a silent threat. "Get your hands out of your pockets." The officer barked, voice strained with aggression. Marcus's heartbeat quickened, but he kept his hands still. "I'm just standing here, officer." "Get him out now." Marcus hesitated, eyes scanning the street. The tension crackled like an electric wire. One wrong move, one wrong gesture. He knew how this could end, but he wasn't going to back down. Not tonight. "Stop filming and get over here." The officer took a step forward, his face twisted in a mask of fury. Marcus's thumb hovered over the record button. The sound of his breath was louder than the officer's shouting. Then it happened. The officer lunged at him, shoving him backward. His phone hit the pavement. Still recording. With the camera still live, the truth spilled out. Secrets of corruption, racism, and a system rigged to fail. It was all there, in the open, and the whole world could see it. Marcus Williams stood on a cracked sidewalk, his boots barely skimming the edge of the curb. The heat of the late afternoon sun hung heavy over the street, radiating off the asphalt in waves. He had just finished a long day at the auto shop and was looking forward to a quiet evening. His mind wandered to thoughts of dinner, maybe some takeout and a cold beer, nothing too complicated. But as his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, that familiar sting hit him, the flash of red and blue lights. He sighed, pressing his palm against the steering wheel. Another stop, another moment of tension, of waiting for the officer to decide if today was the day he'd be randomly checked. It didn't matter how clean his record was or how good his intentions were. He was black, and that was reason enough for suspicion. The city, like so many others, had its unspoken rules, and he had learned them well. As Marcus pulled over, his knuckles white on the wheel, he could feel the officer's eyes on him before the car even stopped moving. The patrol car's engine rumbled, its headlights flashing a bright white light into his rearview mirror. The officer stepped out of the car, his figure a tall silhouette against the sun, his hands resting at his sides. The officer didn't hesitate as he approached, his boots tapping the pavement in sharp, rhythmic steps. His hand lingered near the baton on his belt, just enough to be seen, just enough to signal the power he wielded. "License and registration." The officer barked, his voice thick with authority. Marcus reached for his glove box, his fingers brushing the paper as he pulled it open. His mind raced. He knew the drill, slow movements, keep calm. But there was something different in the officer's stance today, something colder in his eyes. The officer's gaze never wavered from Marcus, and it felt as though every movement he made was being analyzed, judged. "Where you headed?" The question came out sharp, almost accusatory. Marcus paused, meeting the officer's eyes. He took a deep breath. "Home. Just finished work." The officer narrowed his eyes. "Let me see your hands." "Now." Marcus didn't flinch. He slowly raised his hands, palms open. "I'm just trying to get home." Out of the car. The officer's voice had dropped, now tinged with menace. He took a step closer, his boots scraping against the pavement. "What's going on?" Marcus's chest tightened. He hadn't even done anything wrong. A minor traffic violation, a broken taillight, maybe. Yet the officer's posture had shifted. This wasn't just about a citation anymore. "I said, out of the car," the officer repeated, his hand now hovering over his belt again. Marcus glanced around. The street was deserted, save for a few parked cars in the distance. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat, but he didn't reach for it. Instead, his eyes darted between the officer and the street behind him. A wave of heat surged in his chest, and his heart began to thud in his ears. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus's voice, though steady, was laced with frustration. "I haven't done anything wrong." The officer was already at the door, hand on the handle. He wrenched the door open with a force that rattled the frame. "I said out of the car. You don't get to question me." Marcus took a step back, his gaze flicking to the camera on the corner of the intersection. His fingers hovered over his phone on the seat, and without thinking, he hit record. The screen flickered to life, and his breath caught in his throat. This moment was already being captured. "Stop filming." The officer growled, leaning in closer. "Get your hands out of your pockets." Marcus didn't move. His phone was now rolling, capturing the scene as the officer's eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on his baton. "Get your hands out of your pockets," the officer repeated, more forcefully this time. "I'm not doing anything," Marcus said, voice barely above a whisper. The officer took a step closer, his face twisting with anger. "You think you're some kind of hero, huh? Recording me? Thinking you're above the law?" Marcus's pulse raced. He could feel the heat of the officer's breath on his face. "I'm just trying to get home." Then, without warning, the officer lunged at him, shoving him back against the car. The phone fell from Marcus's hand, hitting the ground with a sickening thud. "Stop filming." The officer's voice was a roar now. He grabbed Marcus by the wrist, twisting it with an unnerving force. But it was too late. The camera was still rolling. The world would see it all. As Marcus struggled to maintain his balance, his mind flashed to the camera feed. Live. The truth was out there now, exposed for anyone to see. He wasn't just another faceless black man to be controlled. This was bigger. This was a battle for his dignity, his rights, his voice. And the world was about to watch it unfold. The next morning, Marcus sat in his dimly lit apartment, staring at the flickering screen of his phone. The video had exploded overnight, shared, commented on, and dissected by people all over the world. He watched the footage once more, unable to shake the haunting image of the officer's hands tightening around his wrist. The sound of the officer's voice, twisted in rage, echoed in his ears. His chest tightened every time the officer's baton was caught on the screen, like the beginning of something much darker. Marcus ran a hand through his hair and let out a breath. He'd known what the world would think. His phone, the proof in his hand, would show them that it wasn't just another incident. It wasn't just about a broken taillight anymore. It was about power and corruption and control. But what scared him more than anything was the moment his phone hit the pavement. His stomach churned at the thought that his truth, was now out of his hands. A sharp knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. He stood up, wiping his palms on his jeans, and made his way to the door. Through the peephole, he saw two faces. One was familiar, Carlos, his neighbor from the floor below. The other was a woman he didn't recognize. She had a notebook in her hand and a look of determination in her eyes. Marcus opened the door, eyeing them both cautiously. "What's up?" Carlos grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're going to want to see this," he said, stepping aside for the woman to speak. "I'm Ava," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm with the local news. I've been following the story about the officer, and I think you need to understand the gravity of what's happening here." Marcus nodded, his throat dry. "I know it's big, but I didn't expect it to blow up like this." His eyes flicked to his phone on the counter. "Everything's going crazy." Ava's gaze softened, but there was a steel edge to it. "That's just the beginning. We got a lot of people coming out now, people who've been affected by officers like this one. They're speaking up, and they're looking to you for leadership. What happened to you last night? It's not just your fight anymore." Carlos crossed his arms, his face serious. "They'll probably try to discredit you. It's happened before. They'll say you provoked him, that you were resisting. Be ready for it. You can't back down now." Marcus swallowed. He felt his heart pound in his chest. For a moment, he wondered if he had what it took to keep going. The idea of his name attached to something so public, so loud, it terrified him. But there was no turning back now. The video was out there. He had to keep fighting, not just for himself, but for everyone who'd been silenced. "I'm not backing down," Marcus finally said, his voice firm. But I didn't start this. They did. Ava nodded. That's the point. This isn't just about you. It's about the system. The more people see that, the harder it's going to be for them to ignore it. Marcus exhaled slowly. He looked at the woman, then back at Carlos. What now? Carlos glanced at Ava. We keep pushing. We keep making noise. Ava pulled out a small notebook and handed it to Marcus. We'll help you. We have contacts. We'll make sure they don't spin this like they did last time. Marcus stared down at the notebook in his hand, a symbol of everything that was about to change. The truth was out now, but the road ahead would be anything but easy. Still, as he glanced at his phone screen one more time, watching the officer's face twisted in anger, he knew there was no going back. The fight was just beginning. The morning after the video went viral, Marcus couldn't escape the hum of the world reacting to his pain. He walked through his apartment, his phone vibrating incessantly on the counter. The notifications came in fast, hundreds, then thousands of messages, tags, and retweets. Some were supportive, others hostile, and a few were outright threatening. The air felt thick with judgment, both from strangers and from people he thought he could trust. He hadn't slept. How could he? Knowing that everyone was seeing what had happened, he was replaying the incident over and over in his head, unable to shake the look in the officer's eyes, the officer's hand on the baton, the force with which he had grabbed Marcus. He could still feel the sting in his wrist. That was his reality now. Caught in an image, a moment, frozen for the world to see. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Ava, the journalist he'd met earlier. Call me when you can. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. The anxiety was starting to eat at him, gnawing away at his resolve. He knew the media was now running with his story, but it wasn't just about the officer anymore. The public had latched onto something much bigger. The issue of police brutality, systemic racism, the way the system had been designed to keep people like Marcus in their place. His phone rang. Ava's name flashed across the screen. Marcus, she said as soon as he picked up. The media's coverage is already getting ugly. The department issued a statement this morning, claiming that you were the aggressor, that you were resisting arrest. They're trying to paint you as the problem. Marcus's stomach twisted. He had known it was coming, but hearing it aloud felt like a punch to the gut. He had been expecting it. The deflection, the finger-pointing. It was the same game every time. Shifting blame, making the victim into the villain. I know what they're doing, he said, his voice tight, but they've got nothing to back it up. It's all on the video. I'm not saying it's right, Ava replied, but you need to be ready for the fallout. They'll try to turn the narrative around. It's happened before. You're not the first. Marcus stared out the window, his mind running. The weight of the situation felt unbearable. This wasn't just his fight anymore. The officer wasn't just some lone bad apple. This was about a system that allowed this to happen. A system that always seemed to protect its own, no matter what. That's what made it so dangerous. There was no accountability. He thought back to his father's words when he was younger. Always be careful around the police. Never give them a reason to come after you. It had been a constant refrain in his life, drilled into him by his family and community. But it was different now. The system wasn't just failing him. It was failing everyone who looked like him. And it wasn't enough to keep his head down anymore. Marcus, I know this is overwhelming, Ava said, her voice softening. But the truth is on your side. The video, the facts. People are starting to see it. The more pressure we put on the department, the harder it will be for them to hide what's really going on. He was silent for a moment, the gravity of her words sinking in. Pressure, that's what it was going to take. Not just for the officer to be held accountable, but for the system itself to be exposed. I get, Marcus said finally, feeling his spine straighten. I won't let them bury this. I'll keep fighting. Ava paused, a slight tension in her voice. Just be careful, Marcus. There's a lot of people watching, and not all of them are on your side. You have no idea how far this can go. The words hung heavy in the air between them. Marcus knew the risks. He knew there would be those who wanted to see him fail, those who would accuse him of trying to start trouble. But he couldn't back down now, not when the whole world was watching. After the call ended, Marcus sank into the couch, his head spinning. He needed to clear his mind. There was a knock at the door. Marcus stood up, rubbing his eyes. It was Carlos. "Hey, man, you good?" Carlos asked, his face grim. He stepped inside without waiting for a response, glancing at the phone on the counter. "Yeah," Marcus said, forcing a smile. "Just a lot happening." "I saw the statement from the police," Carlos said, sitting down. "It's the same old playbook. Deny, deflect, discredit. But people are talking. There's a lot of support behind you. We can't let them silence you." Marcus nodded, feeling a spark of determination. It was hard not to feel alone, even with all the support pouring in from strangers. But Carlos's words grounded him. "They can't keep lying," Marcus said, his voice gaining strength. "The truth is already out there. No matter what they say, people know what happened." Carlos leaned forward, his expression intense. "Exactly. But we have to make sure it doesn't just stop with this officer. This is bigger than one guy. It's about the whole system. You've got the platform now. Use it." Marcus's mind raced as the weight of the situation pressed on him. His phone buzzed again, this time with a news alert. He clicked on it, and his eyes flicked over the headline. "Police officer under investigation, but community demands immediate action." The statement read, "The officer involved in the incident will be placed on administrative leave while an internal investigation is conducted. Community leaders and activists are calling for more transparent process." It wasn't enough. It was the same corporate speak, the same half-measure response. The officer wasn't even suspended, and the department was already planning their next move. Spin it as an isolated incident, an unfortunate misunderstanding. The truth would be buried unless they fought harder. Marcus's resolve hardened. He stood up, grabbing his jacket from the chair. "We're not stopping until they're held accountable. I'm going to take this all the way." Carlos stood with him, nodding firmly. "Let's do it, man." As they walked toward the door, Marcus felt a familiar tension settle into his chest. The fight had just begun. The days after the viral video of Marcus's confrontation with the officer passed in a blur. The news coverage exploded with new developments each day, the community divided and bracing for the fallout. Marcus could barely keep up with the influx of messages, both supportive and antagonistic. The line between his personal life and the cause he had unwillingly become a part of blurred. Everywhere he went, he was recognized, a face on a screen, a name on every news outlet, and a symbol to many. But as much as the attention was suffocating, Marcus couldn't turn away. There were too many people relying on him. He could feel the weight of it with every breath he took. His phone rang nonstop. Interviews, activists, friends from the neighborhood, even strangers offering advice. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a theory on what should be done next. Carlos was with him most days, helping to navigate the growing movement that was rallying behind Marcus. He had become a sounding board and a shoulder to lean on. Together, they began to strategize, reaching out to local groups who had been fighting for years, activists who knew the power of speaking out, even when it seemed like the world would crush you for it. One night, Marcus sat in his apartment, staring at his phone. Ava had sent him an email earlier that day, detailing the mounting pressure on the police department. Public opinion was turning. People were waking up. But he knew that pressure could just as easily crush him, too. In the back of his mind, he kept hearing the officer's voice, the sneer that had twisted his features when he said, "You think you're some kind of hero?" Marcus had kept his head steady, but what about now? Could he still maintain his resolve when his own community, his own neighborhood, was watching? Another knock at the door pulled Marcus from his thoughts. Carlos entered with a broad grin, followed by Ava, holding a stack of papers. "Good news, man," Carlos said, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "The protests are picking up. A lot of people are starting to stand with you. You're not in this alone anymore." Ava put the papers on the table, her expression serious but hopeful. "We've got a schedule for a march this weekend. Local activists are getting the word out, and people are ready to show up. This is our chance to push for real change, Marcus. We can't let this die down." Marcus exhaled slowly, looking at the march details in front of him. It was more than just a protest. It was a call for systemic change, a demand for justice, not just for him, but for everyone who had been abused, targeted, and silenced by the same system. It was a way to amplify the message he had been forced to deliver. "I don't know, man," Marcus said, rubbing his temples. "What if this makes things worse? What if they don't listen? Or worse, what if we're not ready for the backlash?" Ava sat across from him, her eyes narrowing with determination. "If we don't do something, nothing will change. You have the power to make people listen now. You can't back down. I know you're scared. Hell, I'd be too, but fear's the reason we're still in this mess." Carlos nodded, stepping closer. "And the system? They'll try to silence us. You've already seen it with how they've tried to twist the narrative. But the truth's too loud now. It's out there and people can't unsee it." Marcus stared at the papers in front of him, his thoughts racing. He thought about the people who had reached out to him, their messages full of hope, pain, and anger. He thought about his own family, his mother, who had cried when she saw the video of him being shoved by the officer. She had been worried, like always, but now it wasn't just about him. It was about every black man who'd been wrongfully targeted, every family that lived with the fear of the same thing happening to them. His phone buzzed again. A text message from his cousin, Jonathan. "We're with you. We'll be at the march. Make them listen." The weight in Marcus's chest began to lift. For the first time in days, he felt something other than dread. He felt a surge of power, the kind that came with unity, with purpose. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. "I'll do it," he said finally, looking up at Carlos and Ava. "I'll be at the march. I'll speak." Ava's eyes softened, but there was an unmistakable fire behind them. "That's what I wanted to hear." Carlos clapped his hands together. "All right, let's get to work. We've got a movement to build." The days leading up to March were a whirlwind. Marcus, Carlos, and Ava worked tirelessly, coordinating with local organizers, spreading the word on social media, and trying to keep the narrative on their terms. Every moment was filled with planning, strategizing, and preparing for what was to come. The protests were expected to be huge. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people demanding accountability. On the morning of the march, Marcus stood in front of his apartment, dressed in black, the sun barely peeking through the clouds. His stomach churned, a mixture of nerves and anticipation. The streets were already buzzing with activity. People gathering, chanting, holding signs. He could hear the distant hum of voices calling for change, for justice. Carlos walked up beside him, giving him a look of quiet support. "You ready?" Marcus swallowed hard. "I think so, but I'm scared, Carlos. This isn't just about one officer. It's about everything." Carlos placed a hand on his shoulder. "Yeah, it is, but it starts here. With you." The march began with a roar, the crowd swelling as more people joined in. They chanted together, their voices growing louder, demanding that the system be held accountable. Marcus, standing at the front, felt a fire rise within him. The energy was infectious, and for the first time in days, he didn't feel alone. He felt connected to every person in the crowd, to every voice that was fighting for the same thing. As they marched toward the steps of the police headquarters, Marcus knew the fight was far from over. But as the crowd's chants filled the air, he felt a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt in years. This was bigger than his pain. It was a fight for justice, for everyone who had been silenced. He wasn't backing down. The march was a success. Hundreds of people turned up, some from local neighborhoods, others from distant parts of the city, all united by a single cause, justice for Marcus, and a demand for accountability in the face of police corruption. The energy was palpable, the chants rising in the streets as Marcus stood at the front, feeling the weight of it all. But the sense of triumph didn't last long. That evening, as Marcus sat in his apartment, scrolling through the aftermath of the march, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. The name on the screen made his heart sink. Jared Weston, his childhood friend and lawyer. Jared had been there for him since the beginning, advising him on his legal rights, offering guidance on how to handle the police and media. He had always been Marcus's ally, someone he trusted implicitly. But now, as the case gained momentum and the pressure mounted, Marcus wasn't sure where his friend stood anymore. He answered the call, forcing a smile even though he didn't feel it. "Hey, Jared, what's up?" "Marcus, we need to talk." Jared's voice was tight, his usual calm replaced by a noticeable tension. "There's something you should know." Marcus felt a pit form in his stomach. "What's going on?" I need to be honest with you," Jared began, his voice lowering. "There's been some behind-the-scenes pressure. From the department. From certain political figures. I've been trying to handle it without involving you, but things are escalating." The words hung in the air like a ticking time bomb. "What pressure, Jared? What are you talking about?" Jared hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I've been approached by city officials. They've made it clear that if I continue to represent you, my career, everything I've worked for, could be jeopardized. They want me to back off, to distance myself from your case." Marcus felt his breath catch in his chest. "What? Are you saying you're quitting? After everything?" "No," Jared replied quickly, but there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice. "I'm not quitting, but I can't continue at the same level of involvement. I have to step back from the case for a while. I've been offered a deal. They want me to help control the narrative, to smooth things over, make it go away." Marcus's heart dropped. "Control the narrative? What the hell are you talking about? You can't be serious." "I know this is hard to hear." Jared's voice softened, almost apologetic, "but it's the only way I can keep my career intact. I've already talked to a few key figures. They're giving me an out, but only if I distance myself from this." The words hit Marcus like a blow to the chest. Jared, the man who had promised to help him, was selling out. It wasn't just about the case anymore. It was about self-preservation. He couldn't believe it. "You're telling me you're going to turn your back on me?" Marcus said, his voice shaking with disbelief. "After everything we've been through?" "I never meant for it to come to this," Jared said quickly. "But I have a family. I have responsibilities. You have to understand. I'm doing this to protect my future." Marcus slammed his fist onto the table, the force of his anger rattling the cup beside him. "You're choosing your future over what's right, over what's happening to me, what's happening to us." "I'm not saying it's easy," Jared replied, his voice strained. "But you need to think about your future too. This fight, it's bigger than you realize. There's no winning this the way you think. Not without more sacrifices." A cold silence stretched between them. Marcus's hands trembled as he sat there, trying to process the betrayal. He had known, in the back of his mind, that things were never as simple as they seemed. But hearing it from Jared, someone who had been his closest ally, made it all too real. "Are you even going to fight for me?" Marcus finally asked, his voice quiet but cutting. "Or are you just going to fall in line like everyone else?" "I'm sorry, Marcus," Jared said, and there was nothing but defeat in his tone. "This is bigger than me, bigger than you. It's about the system. It's about survival." The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, the cold silence echoing in his mind. Jared had betrayed him, and now he was alone. He didn't just have the system to fight against. He had lost the one person he thought he could count on. The weight of the betrayal followed Marcus everywhere he went, even as the protests continued, even as the community rallied around him. There was a heaviness that lingered in the pit of his stomach. Jared had walked away. He had chosen the side of power over truth, and now Marcus was left to pick up the pieces. Carlos, as always, was there. He saw the pain in Marcus's eyes the moment he walked into his apartment. Without saying a word, Carlos sat down beside him, offering a silent solidarity. "What happened?" Carlos asked, his voice low. "Jared," Marcus muttered, "he's pulling out. He's selling me out, man." Carlos cursed under his breath. "I knew it. I knew there was something off about him." Marcus clenched his fists. He said it's about survival, that he's just trying to protect himself. "But what about me? What about everyone who's been hurt by this system?" Carlos shook his head. "That's how they all think. They don't care about the cause until it costs them something. And when it does, they run. But I can't back down. Not now," Marcus said, his voice gaining strength. "I'll fight, Carlos. I don't care if I'm doing it alone. I'm not letting them get away with this." Carlos placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone. We've got your back. We always will." Marcus nodded, his jaw clenched. He had lost one ally, but he wasn't about to lose this fight. The truth was out there, and nothing would silence it. Not Jared, not the police, not the system. It was time to fight back in a way that would make them hear it. He wasn't just Marcus anymore. He was a voice, and he wasn't going anywhere. The weeks following Jared's betrayal were the hardest Marcus had faced. The protests continued, but they had begun to shift in tone. What started as an outpouring of anger and hope had become a simmering, tense standoff. People had gathered, they had marched, and they had screamed for justice. But still, nothing had changed. The police officer was on paid leave, an internal investigation underway, nothing more than a hollow promise of accountability. It felt like the system was slowly grinding them down, wearing down the hope that had sparked the initial fire. Marcus spent days replaying every conversation he had had with Jared, with Carlos, with Ava, every moment when he thought things were moving in the right direction. He knew Jared's betrayal had hit him harder than he cared to admit, but it wasn't just personal. It was about trust, about the reality of the fight ahead. How could he trust anyone, especially when it felt like the world was built to protect the ones who needed to be held accountable the most? But he refused to let it crush him. Marcus began to dig deeper. He couldn't let the system swallow him whole. The police department was full of corrupt officers, and he was only scratching the surface. The more he uncovered, the more he realized that the officer who had attacked him wasn't an isolated incident. There was a pattern, multiple complaints of excessive force, racial profiling, bribery, evidence of systemic abuse that stretched far beyond the incident that had made him famous. It was then that Ava came back into the picture, her presence a beacon of hope in the midst of the storm. She'd been fighting for justice long before Marcus had come into the spotlight, and she knew the power of using the media to expose the truth. She was relentless, sharp, exactly what he needed. Together, they began to piece together the evidence, tracing the officer's history of abuse, misconduct, and the lies that had been buried by a department too powerful to be questioned. "You've been digging into the officer's records?" Ava asked one night when she arrived at his apartment with a stack of files. "This is bigger than just what happened to you. It's about the entire department." Marcus nodded, his eyes bloodshot from hours of sifting through public records and court documents. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Not with the weight of what he had found. It's all connected. The officer who pushed me, his files got at least 3 formal complaints for excessive force. No charges. And there's more. Falsified reports, tampered evidence. I'm telling you, this department is rotten to the core. Ava sat down beside him, flipping through the papers. "This is exactly what we need. If we release this, we can force the city's hand. But we have to be careful. This kind of exposure can't be undone. Once we put this out there, there's no going back." Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the papers spread out before him. For the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of hope. They were so close. All they needed now was the right platform, the right moment, to bring everything into the light. "I'm ready," Marcus said. "Whatever it takes." Ava looked at him, her expression serious. "Are you sure? Because once we hit send, it's all out there. It won't just be the department's reputation at stake. It'll be yours, too." He met her gaze, his resolve firm. "I've already lost too much to back down now." The next day, they sent out the evidence. Ava had connections with several investigative reporters, and within hours, the story was picked up by multiple media outlets. The footage of the officer pushing Marcus had already gone viral, but this was something entirely different. This wasn't just a single incident caught on tape. This was a skeleton in the closet of an entire police department. The phone calls came in fast and furious. News stations wanted interviews. Legal experts weighed in, some condemning the officer's actions, others defending the status quo. Politicians jumped into the fray, some calling for immediate reform, others denouncing the expose as a dangerous attack on law enforcement. The city was in chaos, and Marcus was at the center of it all. But it wasn't just about the media frenzy. It was a police response that sent a chill down his spine. The officer involved in the incident was suspended, sure, but the real story was a retaliation that followed. His phone rang again, a number he didn't recognize. Marcus Williams? The voice on the other end was low, threatening. "You've made a big mistake. You're digging into things that don't concern you." Marcus stiffened, a cold shiver running down his spine. "Who is this?" You don't even know who I am, the voice said, their tone casual but with an edge. But I know what you're doing. You think you're untouchable now, huh? You're just a small-town mechanic. You really think you can take down the whole department? Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. What do you want? Nothing, the voice said, almost sounding amused. But I want you to think long and hard about what's coming next. You might have uncovered some truths, but you haven't seen the whole picture. There are consequences for people like you. Before Marcus could respond, the line went dead. The breath caught in his throat, and the weight of it all, of what he was up against, finally hit him. They were not just going to let this go. There would be retaliation, and he was in the crosshairs. He glanced over at Ava, who had been silent during the call. Her eyes narrowed in thought. They're not going to let this slide, she said quietly. This isn't just about the officer anymore. You expose something bigger. They'll come after you, your life, your family. You need to be prepared for that. Marcus didn't respond immediately. His mind was reeling, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't back down. Not now. Not after everything he had exposed. He had opened the floodgates, and there was no turning back. If the system was going to protect its own, then it was up to him to make sure that the truth couldn't be silenced. They can't scare me off, Marcus said finally, his voice firm. I'm going all the way with this. Whatever happens next, we fight. Ava nodded, her face set in determination. We fight. The moment Marcus hit send on the last of the files, the wave of retaliation came crashing down faster than he had anticipated. What had once been a fight for justice, an effort to expose the truth, had now ignited a fury so intense that it threatened to swallow him whole. The media storm had reached fever pitch. The report detailing the officer's extensive history of corruption and misconduct had sent shockwaves through the city. News outlets picked up the story, but not all of them played fair. Some labeled him a troublemaker. Others questioned his motivations, and a few cast him as the villain of his own story. The support that had once felt overwhelming now felt suffocating, and Marcus knew the truth. The people who had once stood with him were beginning to lose faith. The whispers of doubt were growing louder. On the morning following the release of the files, Marcus woke up to a flood of notifications on his phone. His inbox was filled with hate mail, some from strangers, others from people he had known all his life. The threats were vague, laced with hostility and veiled warnings. You're making a mistake. This is what happens when you stir the pot. You'll regret this, Marcus. The truth will come out soon enough. His stomach churned with every new message. The bile of fear bubbled up in his throat, but he pushed it down. He couldn't let it consume him. But it was hard. The weight of it all, the media, the online backlash, the real threats that loomed just beyond his doorstep, began to close in on him. It felt like the walls were closing in. His phone rang again. It was Carlos. Hey, man. Carlos's voice was calm but tight. You okay? Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing his temples. I don't know. I think I just pissed off the entire city. Carlos exhaled. Yeah, I figured the backlash was coming. But listen, we need to stay focused. I just talked to Ava. She said we can't let this die down. They'll keep trying to silence you. We need to keep the pressure up. Push harder. I'm trying, Marcus muttered. But the whole city feels like it's against me. I'm getting text from people I've known forever, telling me I'm making a scene. Some of them are even saying I'm putting the whole community in danger. I don't know who to trust anymore, Carlos. Trust us, Carlos said firmly. Trust your people, the ones who matter, the ones who know you. A moment of silence stretched between them before Marcus spoke again, his voice heavy with exhaustion. The officer suspended, sure, but nothing's changed. They've started to paint me as the villain. The department's dragging its feet. And it's not just the police. People are starting to ask if it's worth it, if it's worth the trouble I've caused. I'm not just fighting for myself anymore. It feels like I'm losing everything. My reputation, my friends, my peace of mind. Carlos paused for a beat. Marcus, you can't worry about people who don't see the bigger picture. You're doing this for something real, for something bigger than just one bad cop or one incident. Don't lose sight of that. We're in this together. Marcus clenched his jaw. He wanted to believe it. He wanted to believe that the cause was still worth the sacrifice. But with every new message, every new threat, It felt harder to hold on to that conviction. The protests had escalated. 2. The media painted a picture of chaos, not change. Some protesters clashed with police. The anger was spilling over, and the police were pushing back harder than before. Ava had warned him it wouldn't be easy. She had warned him that the deeper they dug into the department's corruption, the more dangerous it would get. She had been right, but that didn't make it any easier to bear. Later that evening, Marcus sat down with Ava. She looked tired, too, her eyes heavy as though she hadn't slept in days. The pressure was wearing her down, too, but she held her composure. She was always the voice of reason. "Marcus," she said, sitting across from him, "I need you to be prepared. The police department is calling in their favors. They're working overtime to get the narrative back on their side. This won't be over easily. The pressure is going to keep building. But we have a chance to make this change permanent. We can't let them twist it." Marcus nodded, but the doubt lingered in the pit of his stomach. He'd seen the department's statement, their denial of the corruption. They had already framed the situation as an isolated incident, but he knew better now. He had seen the documents, the pattern of abuse, the lies that had been buried. Still, the more he exposed, the more they dug in. His phone buzzed again. Another hate message, this time from someone he used to call a friend. The words burned. "You've made your bed. Don't come crawling back when it all falls apart." Marcus threw his phone onto the couch, rubbing his hands over his face. "How much more of this can I take, Ava? How much longer do I keep fighting when it feels like everything is falling apart?" Ava leaned forward, her face hardening with resolve. "As long as it takes. You can't let them make you feel small. You've got the truth on your side, Marcus. Don't ever forget that. This fight is bigger than just you and me. It's for everyone who has suffered in silence." Marcus sighed, the weight of her words settling on his shoulders like a heavy coat. But what if the fight never ends? What if this is all just a game to them? "It won't be a game for them much longer," Ava said quietly. "When enough people see the truth, when enough people are tired of the lies, they can't ignore it. The truth is a force of nature, and it always wins in the end." That night, Marcus sat on his porch, staring out into the darkened streets. He could hear the distant hum of city traffic, the sirens in the distance, the occasional voice raised in anger. It was the sound of a city in turmoil, a city in the middle of reckoning. And in that reckoning, Marcus realized something. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It wasn't just about him or his pain. It was about every person who had been treated unfairly. Every person who had ever been targeted by a system designed to break them down. This was bigger than him. The backlash, the threats, the fear, it was all part of the fight. And he wasn't going to let it stop him. The fight was just beginning. The pressure had been building for weeks. Each day brought more noise, more threats, and more media spin. The police had issued their official response, dismissing Marcus's allegations as exaggerated, claiming that the video was taken out of context. They called the protests disruptions, even going so far as to say that Marcus had instigated the violence in the streets. The more he fought, the more they turned the narrative against him. But Marcus couldn't back down. Not now. The city was on edge. He could feel it in the air, the rising anger, the sense that people were reaching a breaking point. A town hall meeting had been called by the police department. They'd announced it as a forum for discussing the issues surrounding the protests and recent events. But Marcus knew it was nothing more than a tactic to quiet the public's anger. It would be their opportunity to spin their story, to control the narrative once and for all. But Marcus wasn't about to let that happen. This time, he was going to stand in front of them, and he wasn't going to be silenced. Carlos was with him. As always, his steady presence a reminder that Marcus wasn't alone in this. Ava was there too, her determined eyes watching the crowd as they made their way into the hall. The air was thick with tension, the murmurs of people gathering in the lobby as they prepared to hear from the department. There was a mixture of excitement and fear in the room, a shared understanding that this could be the moment when everything changed. "We're going to do this the right way," Carlos said quietly, leaning in. "Let them try to spin their version. You've got the truth on your side." Marcus nodded, his jaw clenched. His eyes scanned the room. The police were already seated, huddled together in a corner, their faces stoic and unreadable. He could see the chief, the man who'd been silent throughout the entire ordeal. Behind him, a few high-ranking officers glanced around the room, their eyes cold and unbothered by the crowd. They were confident that their influence would win out. They were wrong. The meeting began with an obligatory speech from the mayor, who praised the department for its quick response to the situation. His words were hollow, empty gestures meant to diffuse the tension in the room. Marcus could feel the anger simmering beneath the surface. People had come for answers, not for platitudes. And the more the officials talked, the more the room became charged with frustration. Then it was Marcus's turn. He stepped to the podium, his heart thudding in his chest. This wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had suffered at the hands of a system designed to protect the powerful. He cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. "I stand here today not just for myself," Marcus began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "but for every person who has been targeted, every person who has been unfairly profiled, harassed, or hurt by this system. This isn't just about one officer. It's about the entire culture that allows these actions to go unchallenged." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. The room was tense. Every ear tuned into what he had to say. We've seen the video. We've seen the corruption. And we've seen the people in power try to sweep it under the rug. They try to make us believe that one bad officer can be blamed for everything. But it's bigger than that. It's bigger than just one officer. This is a system that allows officers to abuse their power without fear of consequences. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He could feel the eyes of the police officers on him, their cold glares piercing through him. But he didn't flinch. "Not now. You say you're conducting an internal investigation," Marcus continued, his voice rising. "But we know how these investigations go. You protect your own. You don't listen to the voices of the people. You don't take the truth seriously. And you certainly don't listen when we say that we've had enough." A murmur rippled through the crowd, people shifting in their seats. Marcus looked out over the room. There were faces, some familiar, others new. People who had come to support him, people who had come to fight for the same cause. And there were those who were skeptical, those who were afraid of what this could mean for their city. But Marcus didn't care. He had to speak the truth, no matter the cost. "The truth is this," he said, his voice ringing out. "We are tired. We are tired of being treated like criminals. We are tired of fear. We are tired of being silenced. And we are not going to be silenced any longer." He could feel the momentum building, the collective energy of the room shifting. The tension was palpable, but it was no longer fear. This was something different. This was the sound of people who had been pushed to their breaking point and were ready to fight back. The chief stood up, his face reddening, his eyes narrowing. He opened his mouth to respond, but Marcus didn't let him speak. "You can try to call us disruptive. You can try to make us out to be the problem," Marcus said, his words now louder, sharper. "But the problem isn't us. The problem is a system that has been broken for years. The problem is that those who are supposed to protect us are the ones hurting us." The room was silent for a beat. No one moved. No one spoke. It felt as though the world had stopped, and Marcus was the only one left standing. Then the crowd erupted into applause. It wasn't just for him. It was for everyone who had stood up. It was for everyone who had ever felt powerless. The applause filled the room like a wave, washing over Marcus, giving him the strength to keep going. The police officers, once so confident, were now quiet, their faces hardened. They knew they had been exposed. The game had changed. Marcus took one last look at the chief, who was glaring at him, then turned to face the crowd. "I'm not here to tear the city down," Marcus said, his voice finally softening. "I'm here to build it back up. We can do better, but only if we stand together. We will not back down. We will fight until the truth is heard, until change is made." The room was filled with cheers. The chief stood frozen, his hands clenched at his sides, unable to speak. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had made his stand. The truth was out there, and nothing could erase it now. The days following the town hall meeting were a blur of activity. The police department was reeling from the force of Marcus's words. The media, once quick to side with the department, now found itself scrambling to report the truth. The viral video, The mounting evidence of systemic corruption and Marcus's impassioned speech had turned the tide in ways no one had anticipated. The pressure was too great, the evidence too damning. The chief of police, who had remained silent throughout the entire ordeal, had no choice but to address the public again. But this time, the statements were different. The tone was less confident, less dismissive. The officer who had shoved Marcus during the initial stop was placed on indefinite leave, and an external investigation into the entire department was announced. For the first time, real change seemed possible. But it wasn't enough for Marcus. He had learned too much over the past few weeks, seen too much of the corruption and cover-ups. The fight wasn't over. Not until there was justice. Not just for him, but for everyone who had been affected by the system. He sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of papers, legal files, and transcripts. Ava had been in constant contact, sending him more and more documents, witness testimonies, internal memos, evidence of police brutality that had been buried for years. The mountain of information was overwhelming, but it only fueled his resolve. His phone buzzed. It was Ava. Marcus. "The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow," she said, her voice strained with the weight of what was coming. "They're going to announce the findings of the external investigation. I'm hearing rumors that they'll try to sweep it under the rug, to make it seem like a few bad apples, not a systemic issue." Marcus set his phone down, staring at it for a long moment. His mind raced. He had known this was coming. The department would try to contain the damage, limit the fallout. They would downplay it, make it seem like they were doing something without actually changing anything. But Marcus wasn't going to let that happen. Not after everything he'd uncovered. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. This was for the people who had been silenced for years, the ones who had never had a voice. He had a responsibility now. He couldn't turn back. "I'm not letting them get away with it," Marcus said, his voice steady. "We need to make sure the truth is heard. We need to make them take responsibility for what they've done. All of it." "I'm with you," Ava replied. "I know you are." The next day, the city hall was packed with reporters, activists, and curious citizens. Marcus stood at the back of the room, a silent presence among the crowd. His stomach churned with anticipation. He had come a long way from that first police stop, but the fight had only just begun. Today would be the final test. The press conference started promptly, the mayor standing behind the podium, flanked by the police chief and a handful of other officials. The crowd grew quiet, waiting for the official statement. The mayor spoke first, offering his usual platitudes about accountability and reform, his words hollow, offering nothing more than the same rhetoric that had been used for years. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, sensing the insincerity. The room was filled with skepticism. No one believed it would be enough. The police chief took the microphone next, his face tight with displeasure, but his posture stiff with authority. His voice was controlled, practiced, as he read a prepared statement. "We are committed to ensuring that all officers uphold the highest standards of conduct," he said. "While this investigation has revealed that certain actions taken by Officer Henderson were inappropriate, we do not believe this reflects a widespread issue within the department." Marcus could feel the blood rise to his face, the words tasting like acid on his tongue. The chief was downplaying everything. It was a slap in the face to everyone who had come forward, to every person who had suffered at the hands of police. But Marcus held his ground. He wasn't going to let them twist the truth. He stepped forward, his presence cutting through the room. The eyes of the crowd shifted to him, and the murmurs of confusion slowly died down. The police chief faltered, his eyes narrowing as he saw Marcus advancing. But Marcus didn't care about the tension. He didn't care about the backlash. This was his moment. It was time to speak. "I'm not here for empty words," Marcus said, his voice rising above the crowd. "You can try to make it sound like this is an isolated incident, but we all know the truth. Officer Henderson isn't the only one. He's just one of many. And you're standing here, trying to tell us that everything's fine, that this is just a few bad apples. But we've seen the records. We've heard the testimonies. We know what's really going on." The room fell silent. The chief looked caught off guard, but he didn't interrupt. Marcus continued, every word laced with the weight of everything he had uncovered, everything he had fought for. "You say you're committed to accountability, but I don't see it," Marcus went on. "I don't see any real change. What's being done to fix the system? What's being done to make sure this never happens again? Because until there are real consequences, until there are real reforms, nothing will change. This isn't just about one officer, and it's not just about one incident. It's about a system that is broken from the inside out. He paused, letting his words sink in. There was a tense moment of silence before the room erupted into applause. The sound was deafening, the support overwhelming. For the first time, Marcus felt that his voice had been truly heard. The crowd was behind him, and they weren't going to let the police get away with it. The mayor looked uncomfortable, glancing at the police chief as though unsure of what to do next. But it was too late. The public had spoken, and the pressure was mounting. As the applause continued, Marcus stepped back, his heart pounding. He had done it. He had exposed the truth, and now it was out of their hands. The city was watching, the country was watching, and the world was listening. The police department couldn't hide anymore. The truth had come to light, and there would be no turning back. The days following the press conference were a blur of relentless media coverage, public outrage, and mounting pressure on the police department. What had begun as a personal battle for Marcus had now transformed into something much bigger, an undeniable movement that had shaken the city to its core. The momentum wasn't just behind Marcus. It was behind every person who had been silenced for too long, every victim of systemic abuse. The truth had been exposed, and the city could no longer ignore it. Marcus sat in his apartment that evening, his thoughts swirling as he watched the news reports on his phone. The headlines were everywhere. Protests demand accountability after police scandal. City reels from police corruption revelation. His face was plastered across every news outlet. He had become a symbol of resistance, of courage, but he couldn't help feeling overwhelmed. The fight was far from over. The phone rang, snapping him from his thoughts. He recognized the number immediately. Ava. "Hey, how's it going?" he answered, his voice weary. "We've made progress." Ava's voice came through with a note of relief. The pressure's building on the department. The chief had to call in a special meeting with city officials this morning. They're discussing real reforms. There's talk of restructuring how complaints are handled, more oversight on officers. This is exactly what we wanted. Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring out the window, his mind processing the weight of her words. "Is it enough?" he asked quietly. "Are they really going to change?" "I think they have to," Ava replied, her tone firm. "Public opinion is too strong now. The external investigation into the department is set to release its full findings in the next few days. If they don't act, the city's going to hold them accountable in ways they can't ignore." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, his eyes distant. "I hope so. I can't help but feel like it's still all just words. Every time we get close, they pull back. The system's so damn broken, Ava. It's hard to believe they'll actually fix it." Ava paused before answering. "I know, but you've made them listen. You've shaken the system to its foundation. And this time, it's not just about you. It's about all of us. We're not backing down." Marcus closed his eyes, the weight of the moment settling in his chest. He had exposed so much, the corruption, the lies, the racism embedded in the system. But even with the victory in sight, there was a cost. He could feel the toll it had taken on him. The sleepless nights, the constant fear, the betrayal from people he had once trusted. He had become a public figure, a symbol, but in many ways, he still felt alone. The sound of a knock at the door brought him back to reality. He opened it to find Carlos standing there, his face grim but with a faint smile on his lips. "Got a minute?" Carlos asked. "Yeah, of course," Marcus replied, stepping aside to let him in. Carlos sat down across from him, his expression serious. "I talked to a few of the protest leaders this morning. They want to organize a rally next week, bigger than before. They're calling it a march for accountability. It's going to be the largest protest yet." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his heart racing. "I don't know, man. Things are already heated. I don't want to push too hard. We've made a lot of progress already." Carlos shook his head. "The progress isn't enough. We can't let up now. The people have spoken. They want change. You've given them hope, Marcus. You've started something that can't be ignored. If we stop now, the system will just keep going like it always has, and nothing will change. The pressure has to stay on." Marcus thought about it for a moment. Carlos was right. The momentum had to be maintained. It couldn't just end with a press conference and a few empty promises. He had a platform now. He had a voice that people were listening to. And if he didn't use it, the fight would have been for nothing. "I'll do it," Marcus said finally, his voice steady. "We keep pushing. We don't stop until we see real change." Carlos grinned. "That's what I like to hear." The March for Accountability was the largest one yet. Thousands of people filled the streets, their voices unified in a single demand for justice. Marcus stood at the front of the crowd, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. It wasn't just a protest anymore. It was a declaration that they wouldn't stop until things changed, until the system was reformed and people like him were no longer targeted, harassed, and silenced. As he walked through the crowd, Marcus could see the faces of people who had been affected by the same injustices. There were parents holding their children's hands, activists waving signs, and even those who had been part of the police department, now standing in solidarity, ready for change. It was overwhelming, the sheer number of people who had come together for the same cause. Marcus had never felt more connected to the people around him. This was more than just a fight for justice. It was a fight for dignity. The march ended at the steps of City Hall, where Marcus took the microphone. He looked out over the crowd, feeling the weight of their collective energy. This was the moment. This was where they could make the most impact. "We've been ignored, we've been hurt, and we've been silenced," Marcus began, his voice strong. "But today we stand together. Today we show the city and the world that we won't back down. We won't let them make us invisible. We won't let them take our power." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices a powerful roar. And this isn't just about me. This is about every person who's been oppressed, every person who's been hurt by the system. We are fighting for the future of our children, for the future of our community, for the future of our country. And we will not stop until we see real change. The sound of cheers filled the air, echoing through the streets. It was a victory, yes, but it was only the beginning. The fight for justice was far from over, but Marcus knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone. And with the strength of the people behind him, they would continue to push until the system had no choice but to change.